A soldier from a First Nation in northern Manitoba is killed in Ukraine.
On the federal side, what we did with the modernization of the Audiovisual Act is making sure that minority languages are considered throughout the regulatory process.
The federal government wants Indigenous storytelling to be protected in a new bill.
As we commemorate Louis Riel today, we are reminded of our shared history and the responsibility we hold to learn from the past.
It's Metis Week in Alberta. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Savannah Kelly. There will be plenty of new faces in the Northwest Territories Legislative Assembly. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs brings us the results of yesterday's territorial election.
Voters in the Northwest Territories have been adamant. They want change. 16 out of 19 members of the Legislative Assembly were chosen in yesterday's election. There were 7 ridings where incumbents failed to win re-election. These included some former cabinet ministers, like Polly China, who was beat by Daniel McNeely in the Saw-2, and Diane Archie, who lost the Inuvik Boot Lake riding to Denny Rogers. The other incumbent legislative members who were ousted are Frida Marcellos, Frederick Blake Jr., Ronald Bonnarrouge, Rocky Simpson, and Katrina Knockleby. In Yellowknife, all 7 MLAs are non-Indigenous, with Clincho Stacey Smith failing to capture the Great Slave Riding. By contrast, outside of the capital city, of the remaining 12 seats, 8 of the MLAs are Indigenous. The new Indigenous MLA-elects are Cheryl Yakalaya for the Date Cho, George Narasu for Mackenzie Delta, and Lucy Kupatana for Nunakput. There are also familiar faces. Those returning include Inuvialuit-elect Lisa Semler for Inuvik Twin Lakes, Punade-Willade incumbent Richard Ajericon, and acclaimed Montfui-elect Jane Armstrong. Returning for their 3rd terms, Métis incumbent R.J. Simpson for Hay River North and Shane Thompson for Nahunde. Both served as cabinet ministers in the last legislature, and both are being touted as potential premiers. There's no political parties in the Northwest Territories. Instead, it's consensus government. That means residents have to wait until MLAs cast secret ballots on November 30th to find out who their premier and cabinet ministers will be. Assignment of portfolios to the 6 ministers will be announced on December 7th. Charlotte Morit-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
We want to hear what you think about the future of the NWT government following this week's election. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X, previously known as Twitter. Follow APTN to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The community of Opaskwayak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba is mourning the loss of one of its members who died this week going to fight in Ukraine. His family says he enlisted with the intention of staying until the conflict with Russia is over. Tamara Pimentel has more.
It was on November 13 when the family of Austin Laughlin-Bercier got the call. The soldier from Opaskwayak had been missing for 2 days while fighting in Ukraine. Later that day, they were told the 25-year-old was dead. Austin's sister, Faith Laughlin-Bercier, says he was always offering a helping hand. In a message to APTN, she wrote, "He told me when he was done fighting, he wanted to come back to our reserve and become someone who can teach the young children of our community." In 2016, Austin graduated from the Bold Eagle program, military training combined with traditional teachings. From there, he volunteered in Peru, teaching English in small communities. He then went to Europe in 2022 and decided to help more communities in Portugal. Not long after, he enlisted in the Ukrainian army at the Poland border. 2 months in, he posted on his social media page, "Seeing all the people losing their homes and loved ones while Russia was indiscriminately killing civilians and committing war crime after war crime, it was extremely infuriating. I felt obligated to come and I will stay until this conflict is over." he sent his last message to his mom on November 9. Faith says her brother's body hasn't been found yet due to ongoing combat, but will rest next to his cookum when he returns. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
After 2 days and 20 rounds of voting, the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs elected Andrea Paul as she now becomes the Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief to represent Nova Scotia. APTN's Angel Moore spoke with Chief Paul.
It took 2 days of voting and 20 ballots to elect Andrea Paul Regional Chief of Nova Scotia.
They went in, they believed in their candidates, and they supported the candidates that they believed in. And I guess it just really speaks volumes of the commitment of the candidates that came in. So I think at the end of the day, it was an excellent process to go through.
Paul was chief of the Pictou Landing First Nation for the last 12 years. She says it was a tough decision to run for the position.
Because I love working for my community. I was debating, right? Because I love all the work that's happening in my community. I've never worked anywhere outside of my community. I am a very loyal person. I worked in my community since 1992. And so there was a lot of thought that went into this.
After holding the position as interim chief, replacing regional chief Paul J. Prosper, who was appointed to the Senate of Canada last July, Paul decided to run for the position.
One day I hope to see an end in childhood poverty or, having food security and healthy families. You get to really look at these issues. And so for me, being a regional chief and being the interim regional chief, I was able to sit in these meetings for the last 3 months and just listen to the issues around the executive table.
Paul's first role as regional chief is to prepare for the upcoming election of a new national chief in December. Paul does not have a favorite among the 6 candidates. She is instead focused on ensuring people vote.
I want to make sure that the chiefs or their proxies are registered, so that they are able to get either in person or online to make their vote, right? It's important for everyone to exercise their right to vote.
Known for advocating for the successful closure of a pulp and paper mill that polluted the waters in her community for over 50 years, Paul says she will continue to protect Mi'kmaq rights.
The amount of support I received from all over, from men, from women, from the kids even. It really motivated me even more and empowered me that I had made the right decision.
The position of regional chief is 3 years. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabukduk, also known as Halifax.
And we'll have more AFN coverage for you later in the show. Meanwhile, a legal challenge of Yukon's Safer Communities and Neighbourhoods Act, more commonly known as SCAN, was heard in the Territory's Supreme Court last week. As Sarah Connors tells us, at the heart of the challenge is whether or not the act violated a First Nations woman and her family's right when faced with eviction. Here's that story.
Last week, Yukon Supreme Court heard arguments for the legality of the Territory's SCAN Act. The hearing stems from a petition launched by Celia Wright, a First Nations woman living in Whitehorse. Wright claims a section of the Act, which allows landlords to end a lease with as little as 5 days' notice, violates her charter rights of life, liberty, and security. In November 2020, the house rented by Wright and her now husband was raided by the RCMP. Drugs, cash, and stolen property were seized. They now face charges which have not yet been tested in court. Soon after the raid, SCAN investigators served an eviction notice on Wright and her family of 10 with only 5 days' notice. The SCAN unit eventually rescinded its notice after the family's landlord served them with his own. During the hearing, the court heard from Wright herself, homelessness experts, and the SCAN investigator who evicted her. Chief Justice Susan Duncan reserved her decision. Celia Wright and her family are currently living in a 3-bedroom apartment and are looking for more suitable accommodations. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
We need to take a short break. Coming up, as the Assembly of First Nations general election draws near, we interview Saskatchewan candidate David Pratt.
What we require is a lot of healing at the national organization.
Welcome back to APTN National News. To our coverage of the Assembly of First Nations now. Canada's Chiefs will elect their new leader on December 6th in Ottawa. David Pratt of the George Gordon First Nation in Saskatchewan is among the 6 hopefuls. Dennis Ward spoke to him earlier about his campaign. Here's that interview now.
Vice Chief Pratt, thanks for being with us. It's been a tumultuous year, I think one could say, for the Assembly of First Nations, with the former National Chief's removal this summer, claims of bullying and harassment within the organization. What do you think needs to be done for the AFN to move forward from here?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the program today. And I think what we require is a lot of healing at the national organization. I know that the National Indian Brotherhood and the Assembly of First Nations was formed to bring a collective voice to our First Nations here in Canada and to strengthen our position across the issues from coast to coast. And somewhere along the way, you know, because of some of the challenges we've had the last few years, and even prior to that, we haven't always functioned effectively the way we should for our chiefs. So I think that a lot of healing needs to happen. I think we need to look at some of the internal practices that have been taking place at the organization, as well as hearing directly from the Secretariat and the staff internally, as well as our chiefs and our executive members as to how we move forward and fix some of the issues that have been outstanding this last little while.
There are, of course, a number of First Nations people who say they feel the AFN no longer has their best interests at heart. What would you say to those people, and how would you improve relations between the AFN and the nations it represents?
Well, I think, you know, I know that there have been some issues with our organization. I know that for myself included, I've had some issues with the AFN as well, in terms of communication, in terms of the mandates, and in terms of keeping us in the loop, you know, so to speak. For the last 5 out of the last 6 years, I've been the portfolio holder for the health and social files here at the FSN within Saskatchewan, and I'm co-chair of the Chiefs Committee on Health at the Assembly of First Nations. And I think a lot of times that lack of communication hurts the organization and hurts the mandates. You know, when we're not communicating effectively with our chiefs, when we're not controlling the narrative, you know, and reassuring our people that we're working on their behalf and that our mandates are being advanced and their concerns and issues are being addressed around our tables. I think those are some of the challenges and some of the things that disconnect happens between the organization and not just the people at the grassroots levels, but even the chiefs themselves. And my hope is to increase that communication, you know, streamline, you know, let our people know more of what's going on, and give our chiefs and our people a greater voice at the organization as we're moving forward on the mandates collectively.
Well, if elected as the next national chief, what would be some of your biggest priorities for the AFN?
Well, I think we need to conduct a thorough internal review. You know, I'd like to see exactly where we are at in terms of some of the complaints that have gone forward internally. I'd like to make sure that those are adequately and properly addressed. A number of the reports and files that have been stagnant, so to speak, over the course of the last few years, I'd like to get a thorough review and see where they're at in terms of the implementation around MMIW, you know, UNDRIP, the TRC report, to get a report card, so to speak, and a status on each of where those files are at, but also in terms of the report from the harassment that has been presented at the last Chiefs Assembly, you know, ensuring that the implementation of that takes place, and working closely with our Women's Council as well as our Elders and Youth Council to ensure that those reports are implemented and that the organization is a safe place for our staff and for our people as we work forward collectively on the mandate. So those are some of the immediate things. I think that also getting an update on those mandates, of course, ensuring that the chiefs are reassured that there's good governance in place, that we're doing our due diligence with those files and those mandates and implementing them thoroughly.
Well, what would you like to see the Assembly of First Nations accomplish over the next year?
Well, I think we've got a number of key issues we've got to focus on, and I think housing is one of the biggest ones that we need to work on. Right now, you know that the Prime Minister, excuse me, has made a number of announcements, making major municipal housing investments to deal with the housing crisis within the cities, towns, and municipalities across the country from one end to the other. What we'd like to see is a major capital and infrastructure investment in housing too for First Nations, because there's an infrastructure gap that's been taking place and First Nations are far behind. So number one, improving housing outcomes. I think if we can fix housing, we can fix a number of the social issues that we're dealing with right now in many of our First Nations communities across the nation. Of course, you know, lands and resources tied specifically to economic development will be another priority area that we need to focus on too as well. It's not that First Nations are opposed to resource development and extraction. What First Nations want is free, prior, and informed consent. We want to say when resource companies are trying to develop in our backyards and extract resources, because it's not that our people are against it. We want to make sure that the water is going to be there for future generations and that the land is protected. So a number of things have to be focused on, and I think those will be the priorities moving forward. My platform is out now. I believe we released it to the chiefs today, as well as my 90-day transition plan. So that's been given out to the leadership too as well, I believe there's media. So looking forward to engaging in those conversations. I believe we start our first regional forum tomorrow with the Atlantic region. I'm looking forward to talking with them about their key issues and priorities and the successive regions over the course of the next few weeks, and ultimately meeting our chiefs December 5th, 6th, and 7th. And should things work out, taking the reins at the National Chief's Office and bringing back that stability, good governance, and getting refocused on the mandates of the national organization.
Vice Chief Pratt, we'll have to leave it there, but wish you luck and appreciate you taking some time for us.
Well, thank you very much, and you stay safe, and we'll be in touch with you over the course of the campaign, and I'll see you in Ottawa.
We need to step aside for one more quick break, but when we come back, Canada's Heritage Minister submits final policy directions on the controversial Online Streaming Act. Plus, Alberta celebrates Métis Week.
Together, we honor Louis Riel's legacy, the history of the Alberta Métis, and our ongoing journey toward a brighter future for all Métis people.
Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Today's picture comes from Shelby Durand. Shelby captured this worm's eye view while enjoying a walk near Falcon Lake, Manitoba. Thank you for sharing, Shelby. If you have an interesting picture you want to share, send it to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. On the East Coast, we've got 9 degrees and rain in Halifax, 8 in Fredericton. Nain, -3 and sunshine there. Cartwright, -1. Val-d'Or, rainy and 6 degrees. Saguenay, snowy, 2 degrees. London, sunshine, 14 degrees. North Bay, +7. Kapuskasing, rainy and 10 degrees. Sunshine and 7 degrees in Timmins. God's Lake, snowy, 0 degrees. Thompson, -4. Brandon, 0 degrees and snowy there. Same for Dauphin and Gimli. Swift Current, rainy, 2 degrees there. North Battleford, sunshine and 2 degrees. Stony Rapids, snowy, -9. Buffalo Narrows, -2. Sunshine and -5 in High Level. Peace River, snowy, 3 degrees. Sunshine for southern Alberta, 0 degrees in Red Deer, 3 degrees in Medicine Hat. Vancouver, sunshine, 7 degrees there. Campbell River, 7 degrees. Dease Lake, snowy, 0 degrees there, +4 in Smithers. Beaver Creek, sunshine, -12, Whitehorse, +2. Yellowknife, snowy, -3, -7 in Fort Simpson with sun. Inuvik, -7 and sunshine there. Colville Lake, -11 with snow. Baker Lake, -14, sunshine there. Whale Cove, snowy and -12. Iqaluit, -1 with some snow there. Clyde River, sunshine and -8. The City of Edmonton officially proclaimed the start of its portion of Métis Week this week. The week will feature events celebrating the accomplishments of the Métis people across Alberta. Hundreds gathered to hear about the life of Louis Riel and the Northwest Resistance. Events are planned all this week across the province. Métis Nation of Alberta President Andrea Sandmeyer talked about Bill C-53, the Métis self-government legislation currently in Parliament, as well as giving tribute to Louis Riel.
As we commemorate Louis Riel today, we are reminded of our shared history and the responsibility we hold to learn from the past, rectify historical wrongs, and work towards a brighter future. Together, we honor Louis Riel's legacy, the history of the Alberta Métis, and our ongoing journey toward a brighter future for all Métis people.
The Online Streaming Act has been a controversial piece of legislation since becoming law last April. Canadian Heritage Minister Pascal Saint-Onge submitted final policy directions to the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, or CRTC, to make online Canadian content easily accessible and discoverable on streaming platforms. The minister made the announcement at a press conference in Montreal on Tuesday. This act has led to Facebook and Instagram hiding Canadian news content from Canadian users. But Saint-Onge says there has not been the same opposition from streaming services like YouTube and Netflix. As well, the federal government has asked the CRTC to advance Indigenous storytelling. As an independent regulatory body, how the CRTC does this will be up to them. Saint-Onge says that in Quebec, Indigenous people producing content in English and Indigenous languages will be supported.
On the federal side, what we did with the modernization of the Audiovisual Act is making sure that minority languages are considered throughout the regulatory process, and make sure that the objectives that we're setting is also achievable for English minorities in Quebec and French minorities outside of Quebec.
And that's all the time we have for your Wednesday news. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Savannah Kelly, Marcy Miigwech, and thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great night.